السلام عليكم جميعا. أرحب بكم في هذا الجزء الثاني من جلسة بعد ظهر اليوم من مؤتمر طلبة الدكتوراه العرب الثاني الذي والموضوع الأساسي فيه هو الأدب المقارن. في الواقع أن الدكتور عاطف لمن كان معنا قبل قليل، الدكتور عاطف قدم المتحدثتين في الجلسة الماضية، لذلك لن أطيل عليكم. المتحدثة الرئيسية لدينا اليوم هي أمال مازوز، وأمال كما سبق وقيل طالبة دكتوراه في مانشستر متروبوليتان يونيفرسيتي، تعمل في مجال الأدب، وأطروحة الدكتوراه التي تقوم بكتابتها بعنوان Reinscribing Orientalism or Rewriting the Archetypes, Contemporary Western Female Travel Writing and the Representation of Muslim Women. هل هذا صحيح يا أمال؟
هذا موضوع الدكتوراه.
نعم. لكن وهي من الجزائر، ودرست في البداية في جامعة طاهري محمد في الجزائر، وحصلت على الليسانس والدكتوراه والماجستير منها. أما ورقتها التي ستقدمها اليوم فهي بعنوان Princess Stepping Out of the Shadows Seeing Beyond the Text، وهي تستغل عنوان الرواية التي ستركز عليها. ولن أطيل عليكم. بعد أن تقدم أمل ما تريد أن تقدمه، سأقوم أنا بطرح بعض التساؤلات والتعليقات، ثم تقوم هديل بتقديم ملاحظاتها. وأعتقد أننا جميعا سنتحدث باللغة الإنجليزية، لذلك اعذرونا. تفضلي أمل.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I thank Dr. Walid. Also thank for organizing this event, especially under the current circumstances. So I'll just share the screen. You see the screen? So yeah. So today I'll tell you the story of a woman. So this woman could be me, could be Hadeel, she could be Pakistani, Palestinian, Syrian, she could be anyone. She's a Muslim woman. So her story that I'm going to tell you is told by everyone except by her. So my project examines how her story is told by people who do not only misunderstand her but also misrepresent her. So excuse me, sorry. Yeah. So Princess Stepping Out of the Shadows, Seeing Beyond the Text, is one of these books that introduces Muslim women. So I'm going to start with, excuse me. So in a nutshell, which is an introduction, and the why, the research questions and academic aims, how, which is the methodology, and then about Jane Sassen, the author of Princess, about the Princess series, because Princess is it's 6 books, not only 1 book. And then we've got characters analysis, which is what I'm going to produce today. Yeah. So the next one is in a nutshell. So yeah, in a nutshell, the why, as I said, the research questions, how, the methodology, and then about Jane Sassen, introduce the author of the book, about the Princess series. As I said, Princess Stepping Out of Shadows is only 1 book of 6 books, and then the characters analysis to sum up, which is the conclusion, and then bibliography. So the next one is in a nutshell. So contemporary period witnessed many events, such as the 9/11, the emergence of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, And these events resulted in what is called today war on terror, of which liberating Muslim women is a crucial element. So the liberation of Muslim women is in fact rooted in post-colonial studies, as Gayatri Spivak puts it, white men saving brown women from brown men. So it is not a contemporary phenomenon. It goes back to post-colonial studies. Now, the representation of Muslim women fluctuating between positive and negative is most of the time is negative, has created a stereotypical image of Muslim women, as you can see here in the picture. We've got oppressed, submissive, obedient, and even beautiful. So my work dissects the stereotypical representation of Muslim women in Western female travelogues. So Princess Stepping Out of the Shadows is one of these travelogues. One why my academic aims, or why I'm doing this, is to explore to what extent does a new Orientalism emerge in 21st century travel writing, and how do these texts, Orientalist texts such as Princess, function within the current global political and cultural circumstances, and what effect do they have on their readers? In other words, why would anyone write a book like this, and why would anyone read it? What attracts the Western reader in these books? Then to what extent does this genre of literature reflect and reinforce Western hegemonies? It means, do these books or do these texts support Orientalism and imperialism? So for the methodology, I employed Edward Said's Orientalism in 1978. So for Edward Said, he argues that there's the Orient and then there's the West. So he believes that the West always represents itself as superior to the Orient, which is always represented as inferior. The West does not really understand the Orient. So for the West, the Orient is exotic. But the thing is, the Orient is not exotic, it's only different from the West. And then we've got Rainer Lewis' representation theory, as outlined in Gender and Orientalism. So Rainer Lewis uses the same concepts of Said Edward, the West and the Orient, to analyze the Ottoman women in Ottoman harems. So she uses Edward Said's concepts to analyze how women were represented within the harems, within the Turkish harems. So her representation is limited to the harems, but my work goes beyond the harem to study the representation of Muslim women in public spheres, to analyze also her education, her career, her relationship to the opposite gender or to men. And then we've got Mary Louise Pratt's concepts of the contact zone. So the contact zone is the space where the West meets the Orient, and they have some sort of cultural dialogue between the two of them. So that's for the next slide, please. What's going on? It's not working, excuse me. Can I have the next slide, please?
Amal, you are in control, so you do the movement from one slide to the next.
It's not working. It's not working. So my next slide is supposed to be an introduction of the author, Jean Sassen. So Jean Sassen is an American author from Alabama. She lived in the Middle East for 12 years. 1 second, excuse me. Yeah, she lived in the Middle East for 12 years. Yeah, here comes the slide. Yeah. As a child, she read for Adolf Hitler, Winston Churchill, and Napoleon Bonaparte, which makes sense to that because, because these are warlords. Then she also read for T.E. Lawrence, Gertrude Bell, and Freya Stark, and these are travel writers like herself. So I believe that these authors has inspired her current writing. And then she, as an adult, she moved to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to work in the Medical Affairs Administration. She started working as a nurse, and then she was promoted to the Medical Affairs Administration at King Faisal's Hospital and Research Center. And she claims that she met Princess Sultana in the Italian embassy at a dinner party. Now, Princess is not the only book that Sassen has written. She also wrote The Rape of the Kuwait, that was in 1991, before Princess, Mayada, Daughter of Iraq, Love in a Torn Land, Growing Up Bin Laden, For the Love of a Son, American Chick in Saudi Arabia, Yasmina's Choice, and Esther's Child. Okay. So Princess, about the Princess series. Princess is a sequel of 6 books. And Stepping Out of the Shadows is the last book of the series. The first one is The True Story of Life Behind the Veil. It focuses on the life of Princess Sultana. So Sultana is a Saudi princess. She is unloved by her father and oppressed by her brother. So she lives like a miserable life. The first book focuses on her life, and then the second book, Princess Sultana's Daughters, shifts attention from Princess Sultana to her daughters, Amani and Maha. And then the third book, Princess Sultana's Circle, the attention is shifted to Princess Sultana's Circle. It means her sisters and her cousins. And then Secrets to Share and More Tears to Cry, the attention is shifted from Saudi Arabia to Yemen and Syria. So she adds 2 more countries to that. Next one. So Princess is a series of 6 books published in the period from 1992 to 2018. So Love Behind the Veil in Saudi Arabia and Princess Sultana's Daughters were both published in 1992. And the last one, which is Stepping Out of the Shadows, was published in 2018. So the first book was translated to many languages, and it was sold in 43 countries. And and it stayed on the bestsellers list for 13 weeks. So that makes me wonder, why would the book stay like on a bestsellers list for 13 weeks? Why would what interests people in this book in the West? So I think. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm having some technical problems here. So now the genre of this book is an autobiography. Why? Because it tells the story of the life experiences of Jane Sassen in Saudi Arabia. It is also a travelogue because the setting is remote from Jane Sassen's homeland, which is the United States of America. It can be also considered a misery memoir because it tells the story of Sultana, supposedly an oppressed princess. It can be also considered anti-Islam discourse because as Jonathan Lyons defines the anti-Islam discourse as it is the Western narrative that shapes what can and more importantly what cannot be said and thought about Islam and Muslims. So this can be considered as anti-Islam discourse. The thing is that it does not focus only on Islam in general, but on Muslim women specifically. So I was thinking, can we call it anti-Muslim discourse? So it's food for thought. The lawsuit. This is a very important idea. Sassen has been sued by Monica Adsani on grounds of plagiarism. Monica Adsani claims that she wrote a manuscript, Cinderella in Arabia, and she submitted it to Peter Miller, who is a literary agent. However, Peter Miller rejected this work, and then he said that the work needed a hook. He said, if only you were an Arabic princess. So he rejected that work in 1991. And then a year later, in 1992, he published Princess, True Story of Life Behind the Veil, with his name on it. So Jane Sassen denies and continue to deny her relationship with the book or with any grounds of the plagiarism. So luckily for Jane Sassen, Manhattan Federal Court dismissed this suit. The last point here is Leila Alami and repetition and Orientalism. So it's also very important. Leila Alami, who is American Moroccan essayist and author, explains that the Orientalist text is repetitive. It means it's always repeated from cover to titles to content. So if we can go back to the first slide about this one. So from the covers we can notice that the whole covers are of women shrouded in black, veiled, the same gaze, the same woman, like it's the same stereotypical image of the woman. For the titles, we can see that not all of them have Arabic titles. However, the semantic meaning of the titles is always the same. You can see that there's secrets, there's tears, there's shadows. This kind of semantic fields attracts the Western reader and triggers their curiosity to know what's within this book. So, for the content, so we talked about covers, titles, and then the content. The content is also the same. You see that it's always the same story. This feisty young woman under the tyrannical rule of her father or brother or husband, or all of them together. Then you add to that some sort of forced marriages or honor killing or some sort of horrific event, and you got yourself an Orientalist text. So it's always the same. Next one, please. Next slide, please. Next slide is about Princess Stepping Out of the Shadow. So this is the book I'm focusing on for this presentation. It was published in 2018. It's the last of the books. It's an update of Princess Sultana's life and women, as well as an update of the social, cultural, and political circumstances of the kingdom. So here, Sassen focuses on the updates of social life. For example, women were allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia. So she adds that to the book and she explains it well. And then we've got its 10 chapters of repetition, also the same story. It's a reflection of US foreign policy. For example, she talks about how two political leaders rise in this period. We've got the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, we've got also President Trump. So President Trump in 2017. So the book is heavily loaded with praise for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and also praises the revolution and social revolution of women's rights, such as the right to drive, as I said. The next thing is the characters analysis. Characters analysis. So we're going to start with Sultana's mother, who is Fadila. So Sultana's mother has never been seen outside her immediate family. So no one outside her immediate family has ever seen her face. And this character embodies goodness and compassion that characterizes the true Muslim woman as described by her daughter. So we're going to talk about veil and segregation. As I said, no one outside her immediate family has ever seen her hidden face. It's like a hidden figure. And then sexuality. She loves children and gave birth to 11, creating a large family of 73 immediate members. So these two qualities, we've got veil and segregation, and sexuality creates what Lewis calls the erotic charge of the harem. And this has two main trajectories: the fulfillment of the forbidden faces and bodies of Muslim women, and the fantasy of one man's sexual ownership of many women. So here Sassen is given this, is given the access to the Western reader, to this harem who is full of like beautiful women that no one has ever seen them. So this is in a part what makes the Western reader attracted to this kind of books, because of this access that Jane Sassen gives them. Now, Sultana's daughters, we've got Amani and Maha. So Amani and Maha, I choose these two particularly, well, she only has two daughters, but these two are polar opposites. Amani, for example, is fanatic, obstinate, with all-knowing attitude. She sees every cousin as a project. While Maha, on the opposite side, is open, entertaining, sociable, and all cousins prefer her company to that of her sister. This one. So we've got Amani is anti-Western, while Maha is lesbian and drinks alcohol. Next one. Amani is dependent upon men rather than her husband. So as a child, she was dependent upon her father. And then when she got married, she became dependent upon her husband. While Maha is independent and strong mentally and physically. Amani still shops in traditional souks. She hates malls, while Maha is free. So from my analysis to the two characters, I conclude that Amani is a classic image of a Muslim woman, while Maha is the classic image of a Western woman. So we've got evidence from the text. Yeah. So Sultana describes her daughter Maha. She says, Maha is one of the strongest women I know, both mentally and physically. She is aggressive for the right and aggressive against the wrong. For she is a woman who takes all her decisions and lives a life of accomplishments. She has no need for men to tell her yes or no. She is a free woman. So this is for Maha, or about Maha. About Amani, her mother says, while Amani comes to Karim for advice until the day she married, this is her father, then she turned to her husband. To my satisfaction, her husband is not a tyrant and encourages Amani to use her own mind. It means like she portrays Amani as if she's someone who does not think for herself. She needs a man to think for her and decide for her. So although she has a tendency to seek her husband's approval for all decisions she makes. The last statement is from Amani to Maha, to her sister, accusing her of no longer being Saudi Arabian. She accuses her of being European because she's open, she drinks alcohol, she's lesbian, so she's no longer Arab, she's no longer Muslim, and she's no longer Saudi Arabian. So she says, your country, Saudi Arabia, is no longer your country now is Europe, which means I believe that means that you can call multiple countries your home. So she's no longer Saudi Arabian. Now moving to Sultana's sisters, we've got Dunya and Sarah. Dunya is portrayed as materialistic, haunted by Western ideas of fashion and lifestyle. So for example, she's on permanent diet. This slim figure is the Western model of beauty that a woman has to have. Figure. Dunya ate with extreme caution, counting her bites and never allowing more than 5 to enter her mouth at each time. So she was counting her bites. And then we've got Angelina Jolie's lips. So this is another Western model of beauty. My sister was desperate to be as beautiful as the famous Hollywood actress. However, it is a goal difficult for most women in the role. Mrs. Julie was born with her juicy lips, which means they look natural despite their size. My sister's abundance of injections now cries out for surgical reduction. So she wants to have these lips like Angelina Jolie. Next one, she's Elizabeth Taylor's jewelry. Yeah, Elizabeth Taylor's jewelry collection. She has long been gripped by a passionate desire to create a jewelry collection to rival the famous assortment amassed by the movie star Elizabeth Taylor. Her jewels recently auctioned for the enormous amount of $100 million. In fact, on the day of the auction, my sister was the recipient of 3 of those jewelry sets. purchased by an agent so that my sister's name would not be known to the world. So this is again another Western model of beauty that Dunya would like to pursue or follow to become beautiful. So this is the embodiment of Western superiority and Oriental inferiority. So Sarah is the last character here.
Amal, you have about 3 more minutes.
Okay. So Sarah is the image of beauty, of beautiful woman, as described by her sister. She says, without a doubt, she was also the most physically stunning, that's even above beautiful, of mothers and daughters. She was so beautiful, in fact, that rumors of her acclaimed beauty traveled throughout the entire kingdom. So Sarah is so beautiful, and this beautiful character is a caricature, it's not even a real character. This is what Sassen is doing. She's given, like, as I said, access. Well, Sarah is some sort of like fairy tale princess living in a faraway kingdom or faraway land, and Sassen is providing this access to the Western reader. So I'll just go directly to the conclusion. To sum up, so from sexuality, idleness, and extravagance, and even perfection, Sassen goes to extremes with her characters. They seem more of caricatures than real characters, which makes me question their authenticity and the reasons behind their creation. Furthermore, they confirm the stereotypical image of Muslim women being uneducated, unproductive, dependent, and beautiful in the most sexual way. So this is all negative representation of Muslim women. So thank you.
Okay, can you just get out of the
Yeah, I'll try.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Amal. I'm sorry that you had a few difficulties with the technology, but you know, we have to live with that. Okay. Amal, one of the things that you know, to tell you the truth, I had a kind of a mixed feeling not when I read your paper, but when I started reading the novels. And I have to be honest with you, I read only 4. And I cursed a lot while reading. So it is, and I you know, but for the sake of my comments, I will not be going into the details of the different novels, because I'm not sure that, that any of those who are with us have read the novels, yeah, other than you and me. We can maybe talk about this outside, you know, talk about some of the details. But I'm a little, to tell you the truth, I was very happy that you are showing interest in this kind of writings about the Islamic world, and specifically about women in the Islamic world. And the thrust mostly in you know, in line with the thrust of your argument, they will be very, very different. Hoping that maybe you can utilize them somehow. But let me first of all say a few things about how you talk about the author, Jean Sassen. Now, I think you were too generous towards because one should point out that her first book, which is The Rape of Kuwait, which was her first book before publishing anything else, was actually manufactured as a bestseller. You know, 250,000 copies of the book were bought by the Kuwaiti embassy, and they were mailed for free to everyone. And in my office at the university in the US, I received 10 copies that are still there, free copy, So this is a way of manufacturing a bestseller, number one. Number two, you know, I'm not trying to minimize the number of people who read her. And I think that this is something that we need to talk about. But I think a part of her popularity was manufactured. And I won't get into the reasons and into the whole court case, yeah, because the other writer, I forgot her name, Monica, is actually Austrian, and she was married to a Kuwaiti, and her novel was about Kuwait. And it was also the Kuwaiti embassy that supported her in the lawsuit against her. Yeah, okay. But let's not leave these things. These are not very important for us now. Yeah. So let's talk about the more the substance of your and the thrust of your argument. I was very happy that you were using the work of Said, of Raina Lewis, especially, I like Raina Lewis's work on clothing. I find it very, very interesting. Yeah, but I was struck by a quote that you make on page 9. Yeah? And I will read. It's a longer quote, but let me read. You say, these are your words, the problem is the correlation of the represented Orient with the real, quote unquote, Orient, or as Said puts it, and now you quote a long thing from Said, and let me quote it with you, yeah, where he says, but the phenomenon of Orientalism, as he study it, yeah, here deals principally not with a correspondence between Orientalism and Orient, but with the internal consistency of Orientalism and its ideas about the Orient, that is, the East as a carrier, despite or beyond any correspondence or lack thereof with a real Orient. Yeah? End of quote, end of your quote of Edward Said. Yeah? Now, back to you. I'm reading your text. This triggers many questions as to what extent Sasson's texts are reflecting the real Orient, and particularly that they contain many errors of fact. Now, I was stunned by this. I think you completely misunderstand what Said is saying. In Orientalism, at least, and not in his other books like The World, the Text, and the Critic, or Covering Islam. So I'm just talking now about Orientalism, the book itself. He is not interested in the veracity of Orientalist discourse as a representation of the real Orient. He is interested in critically examining Orientalism as a discourse that is constructed textually. He is a literary scholar. He's not a sociologist or a historian or an anthropologist. Yeah. Okay. And in deconstructing its internal structure, that is this critical discourse, this discourse. Yeah. For him, this Orientalism is a textual construct. Okay. And this is what is important. The issue of representation, though extremely important, yet is not the focus of his interest. I really do not understand how you turn his sentence around to make it imply the complete opposite of what he is saying. You can easily find in other works by Said statements relating to the problems of representation that are closer to what you want. Let us, however, move to your approach to characters and characterization, which is the thrust, of the paper. You state on the final page of the paper the following, and you read it. It was the last slide that you had. They see more of caricatures than real characters, which makes me question their authenticity. Okay, yeah, I want to read your which makes me question their authenticity and the reasons behind their creation. Furthermore, they confirm stereotypes about the image of the Muslim woman being uneducated, unproductive, dependent, and beautiful in the most sexual way. Now, I beg to disagree with you completely for the following reason. Sasson is not a Dostoevsky or a George Eliot, not even a Jane Austen. Yeah? But she is capable of constructing characters. The characters may be mostly static and not dynamic, especially when juxtaposed in these dualities, female, male, Sultana, Ali, or mother, father, what have you, yeah? Which sounds more like a Strindbergian soap opera, Strindbergian meaning Strindberg, yeah? But she is capable of constructing characters, which is actually one of the strengths of her narratives, and is something that draws a certain type of reader. Such a reader is constructed within a community of readers that consumes bestsellers, romances, etc. This reader does not exist in a vacuum. Anything that such a reader reads is filtered through the cumulative experiences of reading that they share. Her characters, and I disagree with the way you see them as representatives of a class of people you call Muslim woman or Muslima, are individualized and not generic. This is where their strength lies. Most of them clearly belong to a specific group, Saudi royal family, and by extension to a specific social and economic class. Yeah? So they are individualized, they are very, very specific. She even emphasizes within the narration the changes that take place for the family within the context of the changes taking place within Saudi Arabia and its growing economic wealth. So they move from being, upper middle class to becoming very, very filthy rich. So is owning 4 huge houses and 4 copies of everything, including attire, games, toys, etc., a typical state of a Muslim woman, as you seem to maintain? In more than one way, I have to acknowledge that Sassen is rather perceptive. I have to acknowledge, I'm forced to acknowledge, is rather perceptive in her representation of that group of people, namely the upper class, filthy, rich woman in Saudi Arabia. We do not even need to prove this. A glance at some of the narratives produced by Saudi women writers themselves helps to show that Sassen is not very far from being close to representing a certain kind of a quote-unquote real Saudi society. Not the general Saudi society, but a part of it. This is extremely important, and I would address it a little bit later, because I want to combine it with something else. I'm aware that this is a very complicated issue, which cannot be fully addressed here. Issues of the implicit versus implied reader and issues of communities of readers. But I will try to develop a few points that may help approach the works of Sassen in a more productive manner, as I think we should, because her work is symptomatic of many other works, and we need to understand how they successfully function in their own communities. Critiquing them from the perspective of ideology, as you seem to be doing, I don't think is good enough, at least from my perspective. So let's examine the tricks that Sassen plays as a writer in order to help us discover strategies and stratagems she utilizes, which is actually what makes her a best-selling writer. Starting with basics, Sassen does not resort to a third-person narration, but to a first-person narration. First-person narration. It's the I. The narrator is supposedly Sultana, yeah? With this, she is sacrificing omniscience, is generally associated, according to literary conventions, with the third-person narrator. For the limitations
yes.
of the first-person narrator, who is epistemically weaker, yet experientially and emotionally stronger. Sacrificing omniscience for authenticity is a clever trick, and it generally works. Now, when we combine this aspect with that of the individualized character, Sultana, the narrator, is able to penetrate the minds of readers as she emphasizes the first-hand reports of experiential moments. And I'm using here experiential, in the sense of Erlebnis and not Erfahrung, to use concepts of Dilthey. I will elaborate on this theoretically in the following. Characters are to be seen as entities created by words, but distinguishable from them and calling for knowledge about human beings. There are 3 basic forms of knowledge in particular that are relevant in the analysis of character in narratives. One is the basic type, which provides a very fundamental structure for those entities which are seen as sentient beings. 2 character models or types. Okay, let's ignore those 2, because what is important for me is the third kind, which is encyclopedic knowledge of human beings' underlying inferences which contribute to the process of characterization, namely a store of information ranging from everyday knowledge to something that is genre-specific and the competence of genre specificity, like constructing readers for certain things. The moment we open a novel, we know what we are going into. Yeah? There is a certain convention. Yeah? But in the case of Sassen, she is not able to seek to circumscribe reliance on real-world knowledge in some way and treat characters as entities in a story world subject to specific rules and subordinate to or determined by the narrative action. Simply because her implied readers, that is those who are reading in English, this is her implied reader, yeah, do not possess such knowledge and actually seek it from the work itself. Yeah. Now, such knowledge, in order to be reliable in the sense of being based on experience, though fictive, is mediated and communicated by the narrator character. That is, a narrator that is also a part of the narrative action and is given a privileged epistemic position, both as a participant as well as an observer. Her narrator becomes not only an experiential participant, but a commentator and provider of a meta-discourse that attempts to control the interpretation of plot, action, and character. Her narrator character is by this split as it falls victim to the contradiction between its voice and its perspective, or to state it differently, between the first-person narrator and the vocalizer in the sense of Jeanette or Mikebal, if you want. Yeah? It is exactly here that we can locate the Orientalist in Said's and by extension Reina Lewis's sense vision of Sassen. To conclude, it is important to analyze these aspects of the narrative in order to uncover the narrative strategies of Sassen. These maintain that they are authentic and close to the experiences of her characters, but instead of giving voice to her narrator, she ends up usurping this voice. Thank you. Hadeel? Hadeel?
Okay. Hello.
Hello. Hadeel, are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay. It's your turn.
What should I say after your long presentation? Firstly, I would like to thank my colleague Amal. It was interesting really for me to read your paper, and it was also interested. I was also interested in this kind of applying this theory Orientalism on your on these 6 books. I just have a couple of questions or suggestions. First point. You mentioned that this work of Jane Sassen could be read as contributing to the propaganda and the media war on Islam, but also escalating this, the spread of Islamophobia, right? So my question is there any character who speaks directly in the name of Islamic religion? I mean, a character represented the religious authority in this text or in other books, the 6 books of Jane Austen, like, for example, a character of Sheikh or Islam, or Jane Sassen just spread this idea about Islam through telling us this story of Sultana. Second point, you mentioned also that the author wrote this series starting from the 90s until 2018, right? Did you notice any development of the image of Muslim women through her writings and during this long time? And also, yeah, you mentioned also that you will analyze the textual representation of clothing as its presence or absence. That was in the dissection method, as its presence or absence determines the marital or and socio-economic status of the woman. I can understand this relationship between this kind of representation and the socio-economic status, but could you please maybe give me an example or explain more this connection or the relationship between the textual representation of clothing and this marital status of women? Just a suggestion small question. Do you have any idea about this series, how this series affected the Saudi Arabian people? To put it in another way, how did Saudi readers receive these literary books of Jane Austen? White women come from another country and talk about evaluate everything in my country, evaluate how we treat our daughter, and so on, so on. Did the Saudi Arabian people accept or reject these books? I am, for my own perspective as a reader, I'm interested to know how the people in Saudi receive these books, or maybe حتى على صعيد في الساحة الأدبية if you know any idea. The last point that I want to say that you mentioned also that this kind of literature can be considered as diary, travelish, autobiographical text, يعني أدب السيرة أو أدب الرحلات أو يوميات. So my question or a suggestion, I think it will be maybe helpful for you in your argument if you go a little bit or dig deep a little bit in the details of the author's life, her education, her family life, I don't know, maybe social or psychological problem if she has. Maybe it will help you maybe in your dissertation in analyzing these books, or because يعني نحن اليوم نعرف أن عندما يأتي شخص يعني في هذا النوع من الأدب، أدب سيرة أو أدب السيرة الذاتية أو أدب اليوميات أو الرحلات، يعني يفرض على الباحث هذا النوع من الأدب نوع معين من التعامل معه. يعني يمكن يعني أن أقول بعيدا عن تطبيق مقولة رولان بارت موت المؤلف، لا، في هذا النوع من الأدب أنا لا أدري إن كان الدكتور وليد أو آمال يعني يوافقني بهذا الرأي. في هذا النوع من الأدب أرى أنه من المهم ومن المفيد جدا أن نذهب نوعا ما إلى حياة المؤلف. يعني ربما نستطيع أن نكتشف أو أن يساعدنا هذا الشيء في تحليل الأدب أو يعكس بعضا من أفكاره. The last point, as I understand this, Jane Austen said our clients that she write these books because this supposed sultana asked her to talk about Muslim women, oppressed women, and so on. So did she, Jane Austen, did she maybe show any evidence or proof, for example, messages or letters between the author and the supposed sultana, or just يعني فقط أنها تدعي ذلك؟ يعني اليوم عندما أتي وأقول بأنني أكتب هذا النص وقد طلب مني أن أتحدث يعني لابد من هلا أستقبل القارئ، لابد من أن أظهر ما يثبت صحة كلامي أو ما أذهب إليه. يعني هذه هي جميع النقاط التي كنت أود أن أعلق عليها. شكرا لك مرة أخرى آمال.
شكرا هديل. قبل أن أعطي الكلمة لأمال لكي يعني أرد على بعض الملاحظات. أود أن أنبه بأن لدينا العدد من الأسئلة التي سأقرأها على أمل لاحقا بعد أن تجيب. تفضلي أمل.
I would like to thank you both for your feedback. It was very constructive, very helpful. I don't know where to start, but I'll start with Hadeel. So you said that Jane Sassen escalates the Islamophobia. You said if there are any sheikhs, I think that was your any sheikhs. Yeah. So there are sheikhs, and she uses these religious religious leaders to say that, well, this is how Islam treats Muslim women. For example, Jane Sassen focuses on the idea of mutawaz, and she says that if a woman is walking like in streets of Saudi Arabia, so there are the mutawaz that she calls the religious police, that if you are not wearing your veil, they'll just strike you with the cane. This is some sort of discipline. They will discipline women to become more pious. And then there's another dedication of one of the books, I think it was Secrets to Share. And she says that the dedication was about this young woman, this young girl. She's 5 years old, and her name is Amal, as I remember, because it was similar to mine. And she says that this young girl has been raped by her father. And then she says the most shocking thing, that her father was an imam. He was a sheikh, a religious leader. So if you're saying that from the very beginning, from the dedication of the book, what is coming is going to be even more shocking. If this imam is going to rape a 5 years old his daughter, she was his daughter. So it's shocking. So yeah, there is sheikh and there are religious leaders that Sassen uses in a particular way to show that Muslim women are oppressed. And then he said from 1992 to 2018, if there is any development of the representation of the Muslim woman, I do not personally see any developments. It's the same image, as I said, it's repetitive. If there is anything, it's the social and cultural, political circumstances that changes. However, the stereotypical image is the same. It is negative. In other books that I'm working on, the stereotypical image is positive. For example, another book I'm working on, the Butterfly Mask for J. Willow Wilson. This is a very positive and beautiful love story. It's very positive representation of Muslim women. But for Princess, I lost hope. And then there's the clothing. I said the presence or absence of clothing shapes the economic or social status of the Muslim woman. Sometimes she, for example, when she says, even inside and outside the harem, as Lewis puts it, like inside the harem, she is not veiled, but outside the harem, she must be veiled. So the space here also, the space affects the veil and the clothing of the Muslim woman. And then I've got idea series of facts. If this series, well, you want to know the reception of these books in Saudi Arabia about the readers. Actually, this is the very first thing I thought about and I looked for, and I was thinking maybe these books are banned in Saudi Arabia, considering how they represent the Saudi women. But I was surprised that they were not. They were not banned, and the only response, the only negative response towards these books that I've seen was only on websites. When I was reading through Goodreads, Goodreads and Amazon. So there were some Saudi people who have read her books and commented, and they said that this is not the States, this is not the case in Saudi Arabia. We do not live this way. So that's the only rejection, the only reaction I've seen. Perhaps there's something else. I haven't seen it. I'm not sure. Chandra. Yeah, and he said that I should dig more for details of Jane Sassen's life, which I've done. Yeah, and I agree with you about the death of the author. We cannot, in this particular case, we cannot really analyze the text in isolation of the author. So death of the author here does not work. So I did search about her life, and I said that in the presentation. I said she was sorry, how are the authors here? Yeah, she was affected by certain travel writers, like
yeah, I remember. Yeah, you mentioned it. Yeah,
that affected her, yeah, her writing. As for Dr. Walid's comments,
that's okay, Amal. We can talk more about this. My comments are of a different nature, and they were not meant as something to be for this kind of a dialogue. I mean, it would make it very difficult. Now, the reason I'm saying this, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to tell you that your presentation and the discussion has aroused a lot of comments. So we have many people who want to say things, and we have also many people who have questions. Yeah. So let me maybe, in order to because we don't have much time left, yeah, let me read some of those questions for you first. Now, there is a very, very long question. Actually, it's a series of 3 questions by Abdullah Shalabi, and they are in Arabic. عندما نتحدث عن الأدب المقارن فإننا نقصد به بصفة عامة التدخلات بين الآداب المختلفة الهوية، حيث يحضر عنصرين أساسيين بغض النظر عن التجنيس الأدبي، وهما الائتلاف والاختلاف. ولا يخفى على المتتبع للأدب والمهتم على الخصوص هذا الاهتمام بالطابع الغربي للأدب والسير على منواله واعتباره قدوة، بل أنموذجا يجب أن يقتدى. وهذا أدى إلى إهمال كم كبير من التراث العربي وعدم الاشتغال عليه، بل واعتباره متجاوزا. أوكي. نحن لا نحتاج إلى إعادة إنتاج نفس الخطاب الوصفي التحليلي. الرسالة طويلة جدا، لا أريد أن أقرأها كلها، لأنه يعيد اشترار الأفكار نفسها والتوصيفات نفسها دون أن يقدم جديدا. وأشير هنا إلى أهمية الاستعانة بنظرية الذكاء الثلاثي. وعلى الرغم من كوني مدرس لغة عربية ثانوي إعدادي، وبعد تتبعي لتحليل الشخصيات أرى أن التحليل جاء بسيطا جدا، وهو لا يغوص في أعماق الشخصيات ودلالات الأسماء أيضا والعلاقات بينها، سواء بالنسبة لسلطانة أو غيرها من الشخصيات. هذه الطريقة في تحليل الشخصيات هي المعتمدة بالنسبة للأقسام التي ندرسها ونحن في الإعدادي، لكنها مع كامل الأسف لا تصلح لمستوى عال وأكاديمي لطلبة الدكتوراه. يجب أن يتم تناول الشخصيات بطابع أعمق بشكل كبير، كأن يتم التركيز على الجانب النفسي أو المعرفي أو الإيديولوجي، أو ربط العلاقات الشخصيات بالجانب الروحي وتجسيره للوصول إلى صورة الإنسان المسلم أو غيره. ومن ثم يقول: أرى أن مقولة موت المؤلف استعملت هنا ملتبسة بشكل كبير. موت المؤلف لا علاقة له بالسيرة أو الرحلة أو غيرها، بل تفيد في معنى ضيق إلى تناسل النص بعد نهايته، فالمؤلف ينتهي بمجرد نهاية النص لتبدأ حيوات جديدة للنص عبر دخوله دائرة التلقي. أنا لا أريد أن أعلق على هذا، أنا أتركه لكما للتعليق عليه، يعني أنت وهديل. فتفضلا. يا أمل تفضلي.
صراحة السؤال طويل جدا يعني،
وأنا اختصرته لخصته.
أنا أوافق الرأي الأستاذ عبد الله الشلبي من حيث عندما يقول أن تحليل الشخصيات هو تحليل بسيط في هذه المرحلة، لأن ليس لدي الوقت حتى أغوص في أعماق كل شخصية، يعني أحلل اجتماعيا ونفسيا وشخصيا، لن يكفيني الوقت لذلك. لذلك فقط أنا ركزت على الجانب اللغوي أكثر، وأخذت بعض extracts يعني من النص.
هديل، هل لديك تعليق يا هديل؟
أنا ليس لدي تعليق، أنا قصدت فقط أنه في مثل حالة آمال سيكون من المفيد جدا أن تذهب بعيدا في حياة المؤلف، على عكس بصراحة ما أنا أقوم به. يعني عندما أركز على الروايات المدروسة التي بين يدي لا أجد حاجة يعني أن أخرج وأذهب وأبحث في حياة هيفاء بيطار أو حتى لينا هويان الحسن أو so on. بينما في حالة آمال أعتقد من الضروري، يعني هذا ما قصدته، من الضروري أن ربما ستجد يعني شيئا يفيدها في مجال بحثها. يعني إذا ذهبت بعيدا في حياة المؤلف، في لا أدري إن كانت يعني كانت حياتها حياة طبيعية أو كانت تعاني من بعض المشاكل الاجتماعية أو مشاكل نفسية أو ما إلى ذلك، يعني ربما ما قصدته ربما تجد هناك شيئا ما يساعدها في إثبات ما هي تذهب إليه آمال، من حيث أنه يعني ربما يعني يساعدها فيما تذهب إليه من ناحية أقصد تطبيق نظرية الأورينتاليزم على الشخصيات، أو ما تهدف به جين أوستن إلى يعني هذه النظرية superior and inferior، النظر إلى الشرق بنظرة دونية دعيني أقول. هذا فقط ما قصدته، وأمل يعني وافقتني الرأي على ما أعتقد.
شكرا يا هديل. يعني أنا لا أريد أن أتدخل في النقاش، لكن تعليقا للأخ عبد الله، يبدو أن مفهومه لموت المؤلف أيضا فيه إشكالية. هو يخلط ما بين موت المؤلف عند آخت والintentional fallacy عند ويمزت وبيتلي، لكن لا أريد أن أضيع وقتنا في هذا الموضوع مع الشكر له. أود أن أسأل الدكتور عاطف إذا كان لديه أي تعليق. طيب، هل أحد آخر من المستمعين لديه تعليقات أو تساؤلات؟ لدينا عدد كبير من الموجودين معنا، ولا أرى إن كان هناك. طيب، إن لم يكن هناك أسئلة فهناك سؤال آخر من مالكة بن سحرة أو مليكة بن سحرة بالإنجليزية. وأنا سأقرأ، معلش هناك أخطاء في اللغة لكن ماشي الحال، ماذا سأفعل؟ Do not you think that what is depicted in these narratives is true with respect to the image of Saudi Arabian women? I believe such kind of writings hails to a great extent the attention of Western readers. These writings remind the West of the Arab glorified oeuvre like the Arabian Nights. Do not you think that what is needed to be done to correct this image and correct this overgeneralization is deconstructing this essentialist image that the West has on Arab women in general? Moreover, what is the role of the Arab writers who master the tools to answer back and contribute to de-stereotyping these stereotypes? Again, I'm sorry for the grammatical errors, but I was just reading. Anyway, Amal, would you like to respond to this?
I didn't get the second part. Would you please repeat that?
The second part. Moreover, what is the role of Arab writers who master the tools to answer back and contribute to de-stereotyping these stereotypes?
Arab writers. So for me, I agree with her when she says that this kind of writing or texts are similar to Arabian Nights, and they attract the Western reader. But I think that if we come to, for example, like I was doing at the beginning of my analysis of Princess, if you want to, explore or try to find out what is the agenda behind writing this book, behind writing each of these books that speak about Muslim women, is some sort of naive thing to think that we can tell what is the agenda behind writing this book. So we will never know why this particular author is writing this book, if it is for degrading Muslim women or for something else. I don't know, but I think that the main purpose is entertainment, because it's travel writing and people travel to entertain. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the role of Arab writers. Okay. In the stereotyping? The stereotyping, I think.
De-stereotyping stereotypes.
The stereotypes.
Okay. Okay. No. This is the influence of French, but that's okay.
Okay. I think from reading from reading Hadeel's work, I think that some authors are doing quite a good job because they're trying to write something more of a feminist lenses, or they try to, how to say, to write counter narratives about Muslim women, about Arab women in general and Muslim women in particular. So I have I don't have particular example or particular text in mind about that, but I do believe that there's counter narrative. There's people who are writing about that. So, and even for example, the one I mentioned earlier, the butterfly mosque, is a positive representation of Muslim women. So this can be considered as a part of some sort of counter representation. So I hope I answered the question.
Okay. Any other questions from the other participants? We have a number of people who are with us, but I don't know if they have any questions. Just raise your hands. I can't see any hands raised. There is complete silence. Okay. I think that would bring us to the. That would bring us to, no, it seems that there is another question.
Like there's
okay. Yeah. Okay. But these are general questions, and I don't think that it is possible now to discuss very, very general questions about the relationship between author and text and so on and so forth. These are very, very complicated issues. But I will take this opportunity to thank Amal for her presentation and for her interest in these kind of works, and to thank Hadeel for her very perceptive remarks, and also for her previous presentation, which I heard without being present. I would like to thank all those who have made comments, who have contributed to this session. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you in our other session.